spare, the future. Harry continues by explaining that he sat down with his father that summer. He says it might have been at Balmoral, though it could have been Clarence House, where he was now living more or less full-time. His final year at Eton was drawing near, and he wanted to talk to his father about what he would do after that. Most of his friends were off to university. William was already at St Andrews, and Henaz had finished his A-levels at Harrow School and was going to go to Newcastle. So his father asked him, "What are your thoughts?" I should imagine that Harry leant back in his chair and thought, "I think I will go and join NASA and enable them to finally ensure that people can travel to Mars." Or maybe he decided that he would become an eminent surgeon and cure every known disease to man. Or perhaps he decided that he would engage in architectural studies and, as a homage to his father, ensure that no carbuncles would ever grace the face of urban environments ever again. I can't imagine that he sat there and thought to himself, "Well, do you know what I'm going to do? I'm going to be a prince, and then eventually I'm going to get ensnared by a voracious gold digger, get completely taken in by her lies, turn against my family and friends, turn into a complete twat, and then basically believe everything she tells me about my family, allow her to reinvent the history of my life and swallow it whole. Yeah, I think that's what I'll do." Well, one can safely say that although one of those scenarios did come about, I don't think Harry or his father would have envisaged any of them. So let's find out more as to what went on. Well, first of all, he had talked about working at the ski resort. And guess which one? The one where Mummy used to take us. And he made reference to wonderful memories, although these must be the memories that he can now remember, as opposed to those memories that apparently he couldn't remember. He said that he wanted to work at the fondue hut. Yes, the height of ambition here. And that his mother, guess what, loved that fondue. But he told his father that he'd given up on that, and his dad sighed with relief, undoubtedly probably muttering under his breath, "My God, he's thicker than I realised." Then he decided that he was going to be a ski instructor, but his dad said no. So then he suggested safari guide. He was told no. He explained he wanted to do something out of the box, something that would make everybody sit up. And then also part of him wanted him to drop out and disappear, just like his mother did. So here he is talking about future career, and we've already got his mum mentioned 3 times by reference to working in the ski resort that she liked, working at a fondue hut because she liked the fondue, and also disappearing like his mother did. Then, interestingly, he says, "Wasn't there one in India a long time ago, a bloke who just walked out of the palace and sat under a lovely banyan tree?" Perhaps that's where he got the revelation about purportedly digging a hole under the banyan tree. He's getting his anecdotes mixed up. But then he says another part of him felt really ambitious. And for some reason, he seems to think that people assume the spare shouldn't have ambition. And that because you're royal, everything's done for you, so you wouldn't have any career ambition. And basically, he didn't want to become one of those cocktail-slurping eye-roll individuals that many of which have been generated in his family over the centuries. And he says that his father could have been one of those people because he'd been told that he shouldn't do too much for fear of outshining the monarch. But apparently his dad rebelled against that, which of course, being told that he shouldn't do something would be a threat to Charles's sense of control, with the consequence that he rebelled against it with a view to then doing what he wanted. And apparently he wanted that for Harry also. That was the reason why he didn't press Harry, apparently, to go to university. Now, that might have been with the fact that he would have probably struggled to get in. Harry admits that the University of Bristol looked interesting, and he looked at it, and he considered a course in art history, adding lots of pretty girls to that subject. Oh dear. And the little horny little bastard. It's a consideration, I suppose, isn't it? But it's quite entertaining that rather than considering, what would be something that I'd be good at or interested in, it's, art history. Loads of totty there. But apparently he said he couldn't picture himself spending years bent over a book. Yeah, but I bet he could envisage himself spending years bent over some filly while he was mounting her. Anyway, he'd been told by his Eton housemaster that he wasn't cut out for university, so there it was. Anyway, eventually, him and his dad go back and forth, and he settles on the army. It takes him away from the prying eyes of the press, and apparently the reason he wanted to go in the army was that his prized toys as a boy had always been miniature soldiers. What a brilliant reason for going into the army. So if you raced around playing Scalextric when you were little, then you were going to become a Formula 1 driver. If, for example, you played with somebody's medical kit, the Fisher-Price one, examining people's ears and checking their blood pressure, you are now going to become a doctor. Brilliant logic there, Harry. Anyway, his dad encourages him, and then talk turns to a gap year. And he decided that he would sit down with Marco and think about what might be done. And they settled on Australia and working on a farm for the first part of the year. And then he decided he'd like to join the fight against AIDS. Why? A homage to Mummy. There she is again. Anyway, Marco went off and did some research and came back and said to him, Lesotho. Harry admitted he'd never heard of it. So then Marco told him all about it. And then he got a plan as to what he'd be doing. Australia, then Lesotho, and that pleased him. He then went off to visit Henners, who was up in Edinburgh in the autumn of 2002. Told him all about it. Henners was enthusiastic. And Henners was going to Uganda. And they made plans to meet up in Africa. And they thought that, Henners would likely go in the army because his family had all been in the army, and they talked about the fact that they might be marching into battle one day, side by side. They wondered about what the future would hold, and then Henners was off to the casino, and Harry said he can't go there because if he was seen, it would cause a scandal. And therefore, he was told 2 months later, just before Christmas, news about Henners and another boy who had left a party near Ludgrove drove into a tree. And again, Pa told him about this, and he asked if Henners would be okay, and it would transpire that he would not be. And the other boy, the driver, had been critically injured. And it would appear that, of course, it transpires, of course, that Henners was killed in this car crash. Then he goes to the funeral, which, of course, then reminds him of the circumstances of, you've guessed it, his mum once again. He then starts to tell us about the fact that he wouldn't be allowed to leave Eton until he acted, that he needed to take part in one of their formal dramas before they'd apparently punch his ticket and let him out into the wild. Now, apparently, theatre's a big thing at Eton, and it was late spring of 2003, and the play was Shakespeare's Much Ado About Nothing. He was cast in a minor role, and apparently the character, Conrad, was a drinker, possibly a drunkard. And immediately his paranoia causes him to think that the press are going to have a field day with this, and that it's typecasting. And he was just told that he should have fun with it and enjoy himself being in it. And that it was wrong for him to focus on the alcohol consumption. And he found out that actually he had a bit of a hidden talent. That being royal wasn't all that different from being on stage. And his dad came to see him and was very pleased. at the performance, and apparently Charles roared and howled and applauded, but all at the wrong moments. His timing was bizarrely off, and he sat mute when everyone else was laughing, and he laughed when everyone else was silent. Well, that's unsurprising in a way of Charles doing his own thing. And then afterwards, he complimented Harry on his performance, and he told his dad that he laughed at all the wrong times, but his dad just looked baffled and didn't know what he was talking about. And what had happened, he said that Prince Philip had behaved in exactly the same way. Anyway, he was pleased that his father had come to see him at the play, and he gave him a kiss on both cheeks, and that was that. And it would appear that that would enable him to complete his education at Eton. So a discussion about the future, which shows again the dim-wittedness of this man and the options that were there, and it's astonishing how often he manages to cram Diana into the simplest of tasks. One wonders when he puts the Velcro across on his shoes, because they're not going to let him use laces, are they? Too complicated. Somehow will he make the mention of Diana when he's doing that? When he's brushing his teeth, will it remind him of Diana? It shows, of course, the visceral nature of his reactions to anything that reminds him of his mother, and the deep-seated impact that her death has had upon him. Anyway, we move on, and it's to do this time with his academic abilities in the next video. Join me there.